Hello, welcome to the Jack and Joe show. Jack and Jack show this week. Jack Stroudley alongside me. How are you, mate?
Very well, mate. Thank you for having me on once again to discuss all things Fulham.
Well, discussing all things Fulham, maybe all things football today. There's been so much that's gone on in the game since we last spoke, Jack, that it feels as if we have a platform here. We like football. Well, I think we like football after what's happened this weekend. So let's discuss it. I mean, when Super League nearly happened, we spoke about that. When there are wider footballing issues like points deductions, we spoke about that. So, I mean, given what's happened this weekend in the world of football, it's fine to speak about it. And obviously, on the podcast, you've got your Liverpool review and your Palace preview, and we'll be covering all of those things. But let's talk a little bit more about what happened this weekend. First of all, we need to have a word from our sponsor, Green King. We thank them very much for their support. Like every Jack and Joe show, Jack and Jack show, the episode of Fulhamish is sponsored by Green King. It's the best place to watch the season's final stretch, including every televised game, be it Fulham or not Fulham. They have over 900 sports pubs dotted around the UK, meaning you're probably within a walking distance of a local Green King pub. So grab your friends and family and head into your local Green King for all the huge title showdown, the race for Europe, the relegation race, all major finals and the playoffs, all of that. Download the Green King Sport app to enjoy exclusive competitions and discounts whenever there's a game on. Let's just quickly run through the fixtures for this week. We actually have a game on tonight on Sky, which is, TNT. Arsenal hosting Chelsea. You know what? I thought it was on Sky. It's on TNT. And tomorrow night, the Merseyside derby, which is on Sky, Everton versus Liverpool. Thursday, Brighton hosting Manchester City. So every night you're sort of covered, really. And then Saturday, obviously, we play at 3:00 against Crystal Palace. The early kickoff is West Ham against Liverpool, who beat us, of course, at the weekend. The late kickoff is, Everton versus Brentford. Big game for Everton again. And there's an even later game. I didn't even realise. Aston Villa at home to Chelsea. And then Sunday, Super Sunday. Wow, it's the North London derby this weekend. Didn't even know that. Spurs v Arsenal. And the late kickoff, Nottingham Forest, who are going to be a major talking point of this video. They host Manchester City. Jack, let's just briefly touch on Liverpool. A 3-1 defeat. I'm not too fussed. However, as was said on the podcast and as has been said on social media, a couple of performances from players that did alarm most Fulham fans.
Yeah, as a performance, it was pretty poor. I think the first half, I think Liverpool started really well and they were deserved of their lead, albeit for a really good free kick from Trent.
Yeah.
Palinya picking up another yellow card. He needs to be careful now between now and the end of the season. Then I thought we started to come back into it a little bit towards the end of the first half, and when Castagna scored out, I think Liverpool were good value, but I thought that Fulham, you could argue, deserved the equaliser. And you think in half-time 1-1, maybe we could kick on here, but we seemed to fall apart in that second half, to be honest. And all three goals were kind of catalysts of Fulham's own mistakes, with the Palinya foul for the first, it was toss-in for the second one, and then...
It was Iwobi for the second one.
It was Iwobi, Iwobi, sorry, I got that wrong. Iwobi with the ball. Then the third one, I think Tosin loses the man, Jota runs through, it's a shot, and then Leno kind of parries it and should do better. Yeah. Look, it's not a great day at the office for Fulham, but yeah, it's kind of one of those ones where, again, it's this really weird end of the season where you want to see Fulham win and you want to see Fulham do well. But if it doesn't happen, especially in a game against a team who are challenging for the title, it's not the end of the world kind of thing.
Absolutely. In fact, we've got 4 fixtures left. 2 are incredibly beachy in Palace and Brentford, and 2 are incredibly important in Manchester City and Luton. So we'll enjoy all 4 of those. Obviously, we are on the side of the beach, so we don't necessarily, as a fan perspective, have to worry about it. But there are now questions in the next 4 games that I want to see, and we all want to see. Tosin, if he does play, he's got to be better. If he's playing for a contract or he's playing for a move elsewhere, he's got to be better. And Iwobi just had an off game. I think that's what concerned me the most. And you know what? You can caveat it by saying the press is so aggressive from Liverpool that they will force you into making errors. And every side, when pressed by Liverpool, make errors. So, their all-round game was a bit off, but we're playing against one of the best sides in the world. And yes, they'd been on bad form going into the game, but they had to get on back to a winning trajectory at some point. So they did it against us. A quick word on Liverpool. Just didn't really turn up in the second half. We struggled to get the ball. We struggled to create anything, but I'm not too fussed about this one. It would have been nice, given there was some, away fans in the home end, and at 1-1, we were really, really delighted to be level. It would have been nice to get one over them or deny them 3 points. But the better team won, and if we could beat Manchester City or get something from Man City, that would be very fun. And it's nice to derail sides when they're on a hunt for the title. I think more than relegation, because we've been there before down there. It's quite obviously you want Fulham to win every game, but if we were to send Luton down, that would be quite sad. I suppose. I mean, we've sent teams down before. We've sent down Southampton last season, Rotherham in 16-17 as well. There might have been one more actually, but can't quite remember at this moment in time. But Jack, football really has come into question over the last few days. We start with Gateshead in the National League. Now, you cover the National League. In fact, we both cover football. So we work in football. But football is letting everyone down at the moment, I feel. And it's a very sad state of affairs. For those who don't know what's gone on with Gateshead, would you like to fill everyone in?
Yeah, sure. I didn't expect us to be talking about this, but I'm all for a bit of a Vanarama coverage. So Gateshead were one of the sides who got into the National League playoffs to be promoted to the EFL. They failed a 10-year, I believe it was a 10-year stadium kind of insurance that they're going to be able to be in that stadium for 10 years. They failed that as a result of the council. So the National League have basically said, you're not allowed to compete in the playoffs. You're not allowed to be promoted until that gets sorted out. As a result of that, they then basically changed their mind a few different times in terms of what was going to happen. So originally they planned on the team who finished in 8th, who was Aldershot, to be moved into the playoffs. Then they said, no, we're going to give the team who finished 5th a bye into the semi-finals of the playoffs. They then changed their mind again and then decided that it was going to be 4th. So a bit of a mess, and not the only thing that's gone on in terms of the National League this week in terms of kind of controversy. Obviously, the FA Cup replays being scrapped as well, but that one was just a bit of a mess. Poor planning from the National League, but more than anything, it was to do with Gateshead Council rather than a league or an authority. So
the Gateshead Council has let the club down here by not signing off the paperwork or at least sorting the lease or whatever it was, and they've worked very, very hard to get in the playoffs. And imagine getting into the playoffs and just saying, "Oh, due to unforeseen circumstances, you cannot partake." I mean, it's unthinkable. So that's there. You obviously mentioned the FA Cup replays. That's almost the oldest of the news that we're sort of going to be covering today. It's difficult because, as a club in the Premier League, this, without sounding too high horsey, because I don't want to come across that way, you don't want to come across that way, because we're going to get onto issues that really do affect us later on in the given the integrity of the Premier League. But the FA Cup replays for us, I mean, I think it's nice. It's annoying when you draw an FA Cup game because you've got to play a replay. It's an extra game. However, for teams in the Championship and lower, probably League One and lower, the replays are sacred. They are what almost keeps clubs alive at times. We've seen it in the past. There's been plenty of examples that have been put forward this week. we're a team now that's ambitioning to maybe kick on and try and start entering into some European competitions within the next couple of years. FA Cup replays are not at the top of our priority list. However, the tradition of the cup is that the replays should be there, should still be there. In fact, we were going to play Oldham in a replay in 2018 if it hadn't been for Oldham to score late and knock us out the cup. That was an infamous moment at Craven Cottage. We've had FA Cup replays in the past. We drew goalless to Spurs. We went to White Hart Lane. We took the lead and we could have got to an FA Cup semi-final, but we drew. We lost 3-1. FA Cup replays. I'm trying to think. We drew to
Wolves.
Norwich. Oh, Wolves! Yeah, the penalty shootout. I mean, those are great nights because we won. Great night at the Cottage where we beat Norwich 3-0. Very comfortable evening in 2014. We haven't had loads of replays over the last few years, and it's not about us. It's not about Fulham. It's about what it means to those down below in lower leagues and non-league. It's a real shame, and the reason behind it is because of the reformatting of the Champions League, which basically is the Super League. It's formatted in that way with the group stages. I don't care enough about the Champions League to even know what it is now. It's like two groups of 8, 10.
It's just one big league. It's just one big league of all 36, and then you're separated into 4 pots like you are already. Right. Pot A, B, C, and D, and you play 2 teams in Pot A, 2 teams in Pot B, 2 in Pot C, 2 in Pot D. One of which is at home and one of which is away. So you play 8 games in the group instead of 6. Basically, is the general gist of it.
The extra games, the 2 extra games you play in those Champions League group games, the way they've reorganised the format, it somehow means that FA Cup replays need to be scrapped. There are teams in lower leagues that play more games than teams in the Premier League across the 38-game season, 46-game season. No consideration. It's all, and this is it now. Football's just pandering to those elite clubs. It's no secret. This has been something that's happened even since Super League, where the clubs got off incredibly lightly for trying to leave the Premier League. They didn't come down on a ton of bricks. Manchester City have got 115 charges. That obviously takes time. But the Premier League will come down on Forest and Everton like a ton of bricks. Where does football go from here? It's very upsetting, and it's especially if you're a fan of a team in League One or League Two or the National League, you're just going to feel like, well, what's the point? Like, obviously, we have ambitions as a club to get promoted or stay up in our division, but the FA Cup is a real lifeline. We could get that big draw against a Premier League team, Championship team, get a replay. Extra cash in the pocket from ticket sales. It's just they've just abolished it for what? Nothing.
Yeah, it's a bit of a mess, to be honest with you. Obviously, only the Premier League were consulted, and I think for me, my biggest frustration in terms of the FA Cup is so replays are now abolished from the first round onwards. Now, in the FA Cup, Premier League teams don't enter until round 3. So you look at, I'll use an example this season with Cray Valley when they drew with Charlton. Really small club. I think they're step 3 or step 4, even step 4 of non-league. So really low down. Getting that replay to host Charlton and the revenue they would have generated from that is absolutely, it's indescribable, that amount of money, and it's unfortunately the needs of the few are being taken before the needs of the many. And you kind of touched upon, I work in the National League, and the team that I work for, they had an FA Cup replay a few years ago against Port Vale, FA Cup first round, kind of the furthest they've been. And there was something, they normally average about 1,000, or back in that day, it was probably about 600-700 per game. And they sold their ground out. 4,500 people turned up, and it was on the television. And I know from speaking to people at that club the revenue that they made from that is what allowed them to kind of springboard and push on and get promoted. And it's so vital to clubs. And it's so, as you mentioned, it's frustrating if you're Fulham and you draw again. For example, this season, if we'd have drawn against Rotherham and we had to go up there, how bloody annoying is that? We've got to go up to Rotherham. But
good ground though.
It's good away but true. But again, you're sacrificing the need of the many for the need of the few, and it's very short-sighted, and it's only you're prioritizing the wealthiest, 1% of clubs, and that seems to be just the general vibe with football. And football, without trying to be too high horsey or anything like that, football just, for me, obviously I love football and it's my job and whatnot, but it's not what it used to be as a spectator. And with all of these new things that have been implemented, it seems like they want to just kind of keep the top teams at the top, and then everyone else, you just got to deal with it, basically.
Look at PSR rules, and that's another example. It's so disheartening. Look, we're a team in the top tier, so we're doing all right, and we're happy with that. But even games like Liverpool at home, like maybe City at home, there was some very unenjoyable experiences from going to that game for many reasons. But let's move on to where we go next. Okay, we're doing it in chronological order. Well, Nottingham Forest. Now, this is just...
Yeah.
I mean, it's been covered by everyone. But let's talk about it. It's mad. But the thing is, like, the initial reaction from a lot of people was embarrassing, shouldn't do that. And then there's been like this turn of the screw where they've doubled down on their statement. They've put out 2 more tweets subsequently since that one on Sunday. And people have gone, oh, you know what? Fair play for calling out the officials. Fair play for actually calling out and questioning the integrity of the Premier League. And of course, you've got to be very careful what you say with stuff like this. And I'm merely just commenting on what was said, but it has made a very interesting debate, and there's a lot of people, the likes of Mark Clattenburg, who is employed by Nottingham Forest as a referee sort of consultant. You got the likes of Mike Dean giving his take, a lot of former referees giving their take on everything. But it's unprecedented. I've never seen anything like it. But it's also from Nottingham Forest, and we've seen it from the owner. It's incredibly arrogant to do that. Yeah,
I think it's without trying to be, again, too big picture, it feels like something that you'll look back on in terms of, with all of these new rules and VAR and PGMO and all that. Every club, at least once, has gone in and complained about decisions. We've done it with Fulham. Every club has done it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, my perspective and my opinion is that, for me, over the course of a season, you get the rub of the green. You'll get decisions go for you, and you'll get decisions go against you. However, it doesn't mean that decisions that go against you are right, and that should be happening, especially when you've got all this technology and all these new systems. It shouldn't go against you. And it feels like, again, I'm not a Nottingham Forest fan, but Nottingham Forest seem to continuously get decisions go against them. Now, I don't think that's down to the fact that a member of PGMOL is a Luton fan or this, that, and the other. I don't think that there's any bias going on or anything like that. But what it does mean is that they're in a position where they could still get relegated as a result of incompetency from those in charge. And if that was Fulham in that position, if we'd have played Everton on the weekend and we'd have lost the game and the decisions would have gone against, which, by the way, I think they were all penalties.
Yeah, definitely.
They're all Stonewall penalties. We would be sitting here right now absolutely livid. And I think that if, we would have released that statement, we would be sitting here and going, fair play, they've shown that they've got, a bit about them. But I do get what you mean. There's a way of doing it, and I think that the initial statement that they released on the Sunday, where they talked about the fact that the PGMOL was a Luton fan and whatnot, I don't think that's necessarily the right way to go about it. But when they, doubled down and they talked about, we will be requesting these audio, the audio from the decisions and this, that, and the other, I think that's probably the the better way to go about it. And maybe it's when, you know, they've got slightly less head loss and they're slightly more rationale. But it's a mess, and it's unfortunately it's something that plagues a lot of near enough every club in the Premier League. Decisions going against them, and Nottingham Forest have had enough, and fair enough, because I think everyone has, to be honest with you.
I think you can have enough and not take it anymore, but to publicly, it's almost defamatory what they said.
Yeah. I don't. That's what I'm
character.
saying. I don't agree with the first statement. The first statement when they talk about PGML being a Luton fan and corruption, and they didn't say corruption, but they basically that's what they were.
Yeah, it was implied.
That's what they were implying. That I completely agree with you. That's definitely a reactionary kind of in the moment from what's happened from the game. But then they came back out again and kind of doubled down and said we want to see the VAR. Basically the recordings, which clubs have requested, and we've seen already in this season before. You know, you look at when the Liverpool goal was disallowed at Tottenham's ground, and whatnot. So that's not a new thing. But I think they're the first club, and they won't be the only club in terms of with VAR and with PGML that will come out and publicly slate the decisions. But as you've kind of touched upon, the way that they've initially gone about it probably wasn't the right way of doing it.
You say you think there'll be another club that does it, but I think that given the reaction it had, it's such a weird thing to do. I wouldn't think that Everton would do that if the shoe was on the other foot. I think of another club who's been really shafted by decisions this season in Wolverhampton Wanderers. For some reason, I felt this was like the most Nottingham Forest thing you could ever do.
I have a question though. For you, is there a difference between a manager coming out in public and slating decisions time and time again, or compared to a club's social media account? Because Gary O'Neill's come out, that every manager's come out and at some point or the other criticised decisions.
Yeah, but they haven't labelled members of PGMOL as a fan of one. That's like an accusation. Gary O'Neill can stand there and say, I think the referee was wrong today. He had a shocking game, and he'll get a subsequent fine for that. And he probably knows he's going to get a subsequent fine for that. But putting out a statement, I mean, a lot of people thought it was like a fake account. That's very funny. And it wasn't. It was a real account. And the problem is putting that statement, you'd think, someone's got to delete that. Someone's getting fired. But apparently it was a message from the owner, who we know is a little bit off the rails anyway. You know, he reacted by losing 5-0 to Fulham by throwing his lanyard like towards the river. He's quite an erratic man in any case. So this is why it doesn't surprise me that a club like Nottingham Forest has done this. But, you know, to call out a certain individual, accuse him of being a fan of a different club that is involved in a relegation battle, it's very childish. However, to double down on it and sort of not think of retracting the statement or apologizing, to actually double down and say, this is the options we're exploring. Obviously, the Premier League are going to come down on them like a ton of bricks. You know, they won't get points deducted for this. It will be a huge fine. And it probably won't really hurt them in the long term. But I don't really know how the Premier League resolved this, because even in the last 3 or 4 years, maybe 3 years, the integrity of the Premier League is being questioned far more often on almost a week-by-week basis. You know, I mentioned earlier Manchester City's charges. I know that's a long sort of ordeal compared to Forest and Everton. But there are certain things, and it's every week, and the Premier League have to defend their product. And their product right now is being questioned by their stakeholders, by their clubs that are in the league. And that's an extremely difficult, hard, and a rock and a hard place to be in for the Premier League, because they are renowned. It is known as the best league in the world. We are in the best league in the world. But certain ways, it even goes back to last week. They announced that the semi-automated offsides were going to be implemented into the Premier League next season. Brilliant. That makes it much more clear what's onside, what's offside. None of these lines, we'll get onto it with Coventry in a second. But even then, it won't be implemented until after one of the autumn international breaks, which means that there's going to be basically two separate, different methods of determining offside through VAR and through semi-automated in the same season. That just makes it the integrity of the league again, because one decision might go one way one week, and then if that was under if that was semi-automated, not VAR, that would have been offside, onside. You could imagine it. No one's really kicking up a massive fuss about that, by the way, or maybe they were when it was announced. But you can bet your bottom dollar that Rodrigo Muniz is going to get offside because he's semi-automated offside, when actually he was actually onside for VAR, and we've got a goal that maybe we shouldn't have had. There'll be examples of that across the season, and that is, for me, whether they can't get it in or not in time for the start of the season, then just don't have it for next season. Have it for the start of a season, because you can't have two different methods, because they're two completely different things, two completely different ways of determining offside or onside. And it's tiresome to talk about this sort of stuff. Whatever happened to the days where we talked about individual players and individual performances? Now it's officials, referees, methods of determining offside, handballs. It's so boring, and this is why football is becoming more boring than I've ever. Honestly, it's meant to be our passion, right? You work in the game, I work in the game, but for some reason, it's just regressing as a sport. It really is.
Yeah. I feel like you've kind of hit the nail on the head there in terms of the semi-automated thing. Why it's not being introduced from the start is beyond me. I don't.
They don't have the right. They won't get the technology in time. That's what I hear, or what's being said. But
I don't get how that makes any sense though, because semi-automated, that's what's used in the Champions League.
Yeah.
So, but then. So they could be put into like the English teams who are in Europe, but not the other ones in time. Like, that doesn't make any sense, because semi-automated was brought in, and then they had to. I don't know. I think it's a little bit above me.
For us.
I think it's a little bit above me. In terms of where you touched on it a little bit earlier, in terms of, you said, where do the Premier League go from here in terms of with the integrity and whatnot. There's not really a lot they can do from the backlash of the Nottingham Forest thing. I think all they can really do is to try and get away from any of these accusations again of fans being involved, of like a PGMO official being a fan of another team. Just ensure that there's like someone involved who can't have any kind of preconceived bias, even though they definitely wouldn't anyway, so that no one can kind of accuse of that. I do think that more needs to be done in terms of communicating with fans about decisions with VAR, whether you show the VAR up on the screen in the stadiums, or after the game, you do an interview with the referee and you ask the referee about why this decision wasn't given with VAR, why was this decision given VAR, just so that there's a little bit more clarity, and that when fans aren't sitting there talking for days and days on end about certain decisions, why was this given, why was this not given. At least if a referee or an official can give some kind of clarity on the situation, that might, and it's not going to make everyone happy, but it allows people to understand more why something's been given, why something's not been given. And yeah, it's just a mess. It's just a mess, to be honest with you.
It makes, I think this is, and most people think this is the most exciting part of the season. It's the run-in. We've got promotion, playoffs, titles, relegation, Champions League, and then cups, FA Cup, Champions League, Europa League, Conference League. So much to be decided. That is so exciting. And this time last year, I was excited for it. Now I'm like, yeah, it's going to be nice to watch. Arsenal, Chelsea tonight, that'll be a good game. But the problem is, in fact, last night, I'll give you an example. Last night I watched Middlesbrough 3, Leeds 4. Okay, actually, Leeds' goal was offside, Willie Gnonto, which is slightly frustrating. But it was one of those very pure, good games of football, a little bit of controversy. But the thing is, football's just marred with controversy these days, even in League One and League Two, because they've only got that one camera angle. Was that a red card? No. Was that offside? No. Honestly, the questions fans just want a good game, and they don't want to come out the ground talking about decisions. I certainly don't. I think it's boring. The fact of the matter is, every Monday on Sky Sports, there's a show called Ref Watch, where you just sit there and go over the decisions of the weekend and was it this, was it that? Who can be asked? It's so boring. But it's a huge part of the game because VAR was implemented into the game to help with the decisions. If anything, it's just made the game a little bit more messed up and tricky to determine anything these days. I mean, look at Coventry. Are you telling me that really was offside?
No.
Had you right?
No, well, no, I don't think it was, and we'll get to that now.
That was such a shame.
It's just ruined one of, if not the greatest, kind of FA Cup semi-final comeback ever.
Yeah.
3-0 down, completely out of the game. I wasn't at the Fulham game, but once it got to extra time, I immediately had both screens up, and I can assure you my attention was much more on what was going on at the Arch than at the Cottage. And it was one of those ones, and this is my kind of thing with VAR as well, is when you look back at what they show, like the lines, like it's going over one of the lines are going over like Wan-Bissaka's boot, and the other one's going over, I can't remember the guy's name who. It was Haji Wright, wasn't it? Who was offside?
Yeah.
Going over Haji Wright's boot, and it's just really muddled, and it just feels like with VAR and with these decisions, it's just making a mountain out of a molehill. And if that would have been awarded, if there wasn't VAR, right, and that would have been awarded, people would probably be saying, "Oh, what a great decision from the lino to not put his flag up there. He's level because it's so close. Because it's so close. No one's going to go, oh, I think he was off there. It would be fair play. The linos kept his flag up, and Coventry, what a fantastic result, what a comeback. They're going to go back to Wembley. But instead, we're sat here talking about how they were robbed of a fantastic win. And yes, they went to penalties and then they lost the penalties, but that's not the point. They should have won it inside the 120.
It shouldn't have been penalties.
Yeah, exactly. They should have won in the 120.
If this was a game against like a fellow championship team, a semi-final against like a Leicester City or a Birmingham, whatever, but it's the fact it was Man United and they're under the bracket of the top six, the elite top six. And that's not sort of insinuating that there was any sort of bias or whatever. It's just unfair. It's unfair on the Coventry fans who's packed out that end. They also stayed after the Fulham whistle, and you could see that sort of. I think that photo, that shot of the Coventry on one end and the empty United stand on the other, sums up football absolutely to a T right now. Just a load of people who go for their day out, win the game, and go, okay, let's pack it up. Not real supporters, not really. I mean, I know that United have real supporters, but you just got into an FA Cup final. That's a very good achievement because they're so used to it, because they're so used to going to Wembley and having these sort of days out. They're not too asked. They're back on the Jubilee line, Metropolitan line, quicker than you can say Que sera, sera. Whereas Coventry, they go, you know what? We lost. We shouldn't have. We should have won. But let's remember that day and let's give Mark Robbins and the squad the applause and the appreciation that they deserve, because they put in one hell of an effort. And it's just really sad how we have an FA Cup final between Man United and Manchester City for the second year running. Like the Scottish League Cup final is, Scottish Cup final, Celtic v Rangers. Did you see what I mean? It's so
Carabao was Liverpool Chelsea again.
One of my really, really big hatreds of football is, and I can understand it from a international point of view. I can understand the fans of international fans wanting to see their team, but it's like pre-season Man United v Liverpool, Chelsea v Arsenal, Newcastle versus Spurs 3 days after the season ends in Australia. I get it. Like, you want to tour the world. The biggest teams want to play the biggest teams in those countries to get those crowds in. But also, like, if I'm a footballer and I've got to go play Liverpool again in pre-season, I'm just like, can I be asked? Not really. That's so boring. And I think football, like I said earlier, is just getting really boring. I tell you what's not boring though. Michael Elise and Barry Eze at Craven Cottage on Saturday. I think we need to park this because we could do this forever. But Palace are in town on Saturday. And you know what? It's the best beach game you could possibly ever get because you've got really good, talented players playing for Fulham and really good, talented players playing for Crystal Palace. And it could make for a really good game of football. Yeah, Palace were brilliant at the weekend. Like, really, 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 really good against West Ham, who were terrible, like really bad. How do you see this one going? It's such a feet up. I could just sit in the Hammersmith end, feet up, but obviously everyone's standing in front of me, so I probably won't be able to do that without not seeing the game. So this feels like it's... Are you going to be there?
I am there. Yeah.
It's going to be great fun.
Yeah. I think it's just going to be a bit of a laugh, to be honest with you. A little bit like the one last season. You know, our mates are sick of me and you going on about Crystal Palace, but I'm very fond of CPFC. I think they've got so many brilliant players and really technical players. They've got a manager now who allows all of those to excel in a system that's progressive and attacking. As much as I love Roy. And I think it's just going to be a really, really entertaining game of football. I think there's going to be goals in it for both sides. I think there's lots of individual quality in both teams. I'm hoping from a Fulham point of view, obviously Crystal Palace playing in midweek, that might affect things slightly in terms of they might be a little bit tired, a little bit leggy. But I'm very much looking forward to this game. I think it's going to be very good. I'm sure you're going to ask me for a score prediction, so I will go with it now. I think it's going to be a Desmond. I think 2-2. I can see there being goals. I can just see it being kind of end of season silliness where, everyone's kind of on the beach and there's a few technical moments that are really good. And it's just, a point apiece.
Sounds good. It was the same as last season. Mitrovic scored twice and Joel Ward scored quite late on after... Was it Edouard took the lead, or was it Jean-Philippe Mateta? Anyway, Arsenal, Palace. Thing is, like, we support a team in Fulham, and one of our direct rivals next season is going to be Crystal Palace because we're probably fighting for similar aspirations in the table. I think that Palace are going to be really exciting next season. However, they're going to have to do their best to hold on to Elise and Eze. Because this is what, again, is so incredibly boring. If Eze, no disrespect to Eze, like Eze will want to play at the best level he can, and he deserves it because I think he's one of the best players in the Premier League. He should be in the England squad definitely for the Euros, but unfortunately, there's so many good players in that position he might not get picked. Palmer, Maddison, Foden, all really good players and have had great seasons. But the problem is, if Eze goes to a Chelsea or an Arsenal or a Liverpool, a top six, a Man City, one, like we've seen with the likes of Calvin Phillips and Matheus Nunes, it's like these really good players from really good mid-table teams. They go to these clubs and they don't play the football that they want because they can't get in the team. And their career just dwindles. Look at Phillips now. It's so sad what's happened with him. I know he's obviously made a few mistakes at West Ham. The West Ham fans just don't like him at all. He liked an Instagram reel of Eze's like best bits against West Ham. I mean, it doesn't help, obviously, but it's so sad how Matheus Nunes was like this really, really good player for Wolves, and he's playing a little bit for City, but not enough. You could even stretch it to Jack Grealish, who probably is playing enough football to get to what to sort of justify that move he made from Aston Villa. But when he was at Villa, he was such a good player. And I hate it because obviously we're Fulham fans, whatever. But Eze and Elise, if they went to top six teams and that sort of attacking threat that they have was ripped apart at Palace, it's just as a Palace fan, you just go, well, we've got a load of money now. We could rebuild with that money. But the actual like unique quality that those two bring to that team is what makes them so exciting to watch. But hey, it would be a great game, and this could be the last time we. I can't believe I'm talking like as if we're Palace fans. We're not, obviously. But this could be the last time we see Eze and Elise play in a Palace shirt at Craven Cottage. And that makes
How
me really
emotional!
sad.
How emotional!
Lap of honour at the end for Eze and Elise. These are two very good players. Honestly, I love watching them. It's such a pleasure because they play with such freedom.
Yeah.
And obviously, we drew 0-0 at Sellers Park, and actually, we defended Eze pretty well, from what I can remember.
Yeah.
He was the one player that was giving us a little bit of grief, but we managed to keep Palace out that day. But I don't think we'll keep them out on Saturday. I think it'll be a high scoring game, like you said. But I think we're going to lose 3-2. I think that quality is just going to show.
Yeah.
Eze and Elise will, of course, be involved in everything that Palace do. But
they're in good form, and you've got Mateta as well, who's bagging for fun at the moment. So yeah, I mean, it wouldn't surprise me. I'm gonna go with a draw. But I think there will be, to quote Billy the Bee, there will be goals in the first half and goals in the second half.
That's brilliant. In terms of a lineup, I think there's maybe an opportunity to mix this about a bit because there was a couple of disappointing performances on Saturday, and it's the end of the season. Let's go with Leno, of course. Calls for him to be dropped has just spun my head at 360. Calls for Marco to go after Liverpool because of his subs. Again, ridiculous. What do you think is going to happen if we lose Marco? What do you think is going to happen if we put Rodak in against Leno rather than Leno? Leno, Robinson, Diop. Put him in. And Bassi. And then right back, Castagna. Wouldn't mind Tete being in there either. Get some minutes under his belt. Paulinho, he's got to be careful on 13 yellows. You don't want that to. We spoke about it yesterday, actually. We don't want to have him suspended for the start of next season if he's still at the club. Where do we go from here? I'm going to start Harrison Reed or TC. I'm happy with either. Nothing against Lukic. I just want to see those players play. And it's the penultimate home game of the season. It'd be nice to see them at the Cottage. Maybe TC, actually, because he's been here for such a long time. But then also Harrison Reed, because he might go in the summer. So I'm happy either way. 10 Pereira, I think he just keeps his place. If Willian's back, just put him straight back in. I think that's what we really missed on Saturday. Bit of Willian. Iwobi for me gets dropped, unfortunately, just due to a bad performance. Although that won't do great for his confidence. However, he's a good lad. And he's faced much worse this season when he was at AFCON. So the abuse he got from the final. So he'll bounce back from that. Harry Wilson for me on the right. And up front, Rodrigo Muniz. What about you?
Without trying to be incredibly boring, I completely agree with that entire.
That's 11. So boring.
That's it. I think that Diop comes in for me. Tosin's made a few mistakes over the last few weeks. And I think that Diop needs to come in. It'd be nice to see him back in the 11. TC, I think Lucas had a good game against Liverpool. I think he suits those big six games a little bit better.
Yeah.
I'd quite like TC. If it's going to be an open end of season, silly season game, I'd quite like to have TC in the middle of the park, kind of pulling strings a little bit. Paulinho needs to be careful. I'd still start him. I think if Paulinho gets to 14, then I am so in the camp of just letting him go for the summer early. Yeah, just let him go back to Portugal for a few weeks. Just to
my fear with that is he'll get so pissed off with that because he'll just want to play every game that he'll be like, "Oh, I'm off. I want to leave."
Well, don't.
Should have thought about that before you got
exactly. Paulinho's strength is his best, is also his weakness, and he just crunches in unnecessarily sometimes. And yeah, it's not a popular opinion, but if he got to 14, I'd be so on board of being like, "Mate, come on now, like, we can't have you out the first three." If Willian's fit, Willian comes in, him and Robertson down that left hand side is huge. Pereira stays, Muniz stays, and then on the right hand side, Bobby Reed, I didn't think had the particularly a great game. And again, if it's going to be one of those kind of end-to-end attacking games, Harry Wilson just has that little something on that right hand side and a bit of creativity to cut inside as well. So I would go with Harry Wilson.
There is a point to be made that Willian might not be back. So in that case, I'm happy with Iwobi starting.
Yeah.
Or Bobby D. Cordova-Reid, of course, who didn't really put a foot wrong against Liverpool. So I'd be happy with him to start. That was some ranty video. But the problem is, the good thing, is that none of those real issues that we spoke about, they're more about wider footballing issues. Obviously, Fulham come into it because of VAR, because we're in the Premier League, but I don't think we'll ever see a statement like Forest made from us, and hopefully not, because it's just it makes us look a little bit childish and a bit silly. Albeit maybe these things do need to be called out. But when like someone gets in trouble at school for like the right reasons, you go, "Oh, you should have stood up to the teacher there." But I'm glad I didn't do it. But I'm glad you took the flak for it. It's almost like that. I don't have a detention. You do, but you've at least stood up for what is right.
Yeah. For what you believe in.
Please. I don't think Fulham would ever do something like that. I want to just quickly ask you. Tosin's obviously been, I went in quite hard on him on the podcast about his attitude and about his performance, and I just want to know your thoughts, given he is signing a contract at the moment. If he turns around and signs a contract, I'll be pretty pleased. But also now people are saying I don't even want him to sign a contract because his performances haven't been good enough.
No, I think that's a little bit reactionary. I think Fulham are a better team with Tosin in. I think Tosin's a really
Tosin and Bassey. That's a good partnership.
Yeah, I think Fulham are a better team with Tosin in. And if you're offering me Tosin to sign a deal or Tosin not to sign a deal, Tosin's signing the deal for me, because I think he is a very good centre back, and I think he can continue to develop and continue to grow. But he's also, if he's not going to sign a deal, play Issa Diop, because Issa Diop, I think, is still capable, more than capable at this level. And I think as well with Tosin, I like him a lot, and he has made a few mistakes. He's also someone, though, who, for the right fee, could be replaceable. I think that, I remember looking back to this time last season when we had Tim Ream starting, and the big thing was, are we going to be able to find someone to, kind of step in and do what Tim Ream does? We've done that with Calvin Bassey. Maybe he's not as good on the ball as Tim Ream at the moment, but he's only young. But what he does offer that Tim Ream doesn't is the physicality. And we've shown that if you're smart in the market, you can recruit. We can replace these players. And if Tosin doesn't want to stay at the club, that's absolutely fine. But start Diop and then recruit properly in the summer. But I'd rather he stayed. Is basically what I'm trying to say.
I mean, it could be a fact that we sign Tosin to a new contract. He does sign it, and then we sell him to make some nice profit from the fee we got him from Manchester City, because we only paid about $2 million for him, which is a steal. It's good business from the club, albeit a little bit too late in that season, and it was. We'd already started really badly, and we were a few games down, and we were near the bottom of the league, and we ended up going down. But Tosin's been a good servant to the club, and his attitude. Maybe he just wants a new challenge, and it's fair enough. Like players don't support the club you support; they just play for them. Tosin doesn't go home with Tom Kearney posters on his bedroom wall. I mean, he might, but he probably doesn't. Not that I've got Kearney posters on my.
I was going to say, are you trying to say something here?
I've still got that Mitrovic one up actually, and he's been long gone. So and also is the person who drew that. So they haven't passed. They're just.
Move on.
Goodness. However,
on, Eric,
for all the like boring stuff we've talked about today, I do want to make the point that Fulham this season have not been boring. In fact, for the last 2 seasons, for the last 3 seasons, for the last how many years, we haven't been boring. But in terms of like the enjoyment I personally get out of watching Fulham compared to other football, compared to the nonsense that goes on in all these other departments of football, Fulham, win, lose or draw, give me immense enjoyment. And we're very lucky to support the team we do. I think we're placed in a nice place in London. We have really nice fans. We have a really good manager. We have some really good players. The ownership puts a lot of money into the club, and we are lucky in that sense. There are obviously nothing's perfect. There can be improvements on and off the pitch. However, I think this is such a wonderful football club, and they are the nucleus of my love for football, and they are the reason I still come back every week. Without Fulham, I could probably walk away from the sport.
I don't think I could walk away from the sport, but my enjoyment of it would be hugely seeped if Fulham were not to exist. And yeah, as you mentioned, there are so many clubs that are an absolute mess. And Fulham aren't one of them. And as you mentioned, everything isn't perfect, but we're in a really good position. Without, a few years ago, we would have sat there, you're going to be in the Premier League, you would have won the Championship, you'd have finished in the top half in your first season. In the second season, you'd have comfortably stayed up. In that time, you'd have had an FA Cup quarterfinal, an FA Cup semi-final, and you're looking at progressing and progressing. You'd have gone, oh, fucking hell, I'll take that. Absolutely. Like, we're in a real good spot, and we've got some really good players. It's just about ensuring that we continue to build and continue to grow, because if everyone improves and you don't, you can so quickly just go. And you need to ensure that you're constantly on top of everything. But I think that we are. I think at the moment we're in a very good place.
Yeah, the only way is up, I think, for Fulham right now, or the only way is the same sort of place. But because the quality of the Premier League gets better every summer, with the bigger clubs buying better players and the clubs just outside of Europe buying better players, and then you buy better players, you could have a remarkable season, finish in the top four like we've seen Aston Villa maybe do this season. But I mean, if we do want to push on, the best chance we have to push on is to invest and upgrade the squad and be sensible in the market, given PSR rules. And that's and back a capable manager in Marco Silva. He's the best manager we've had, since Roy Hodgson. Slavis has obviously been a great manager, but he couldn't quite do it at Premier League level with both Fulham and he didn't get the chance at Watford, and at Sheffield United he wasn't given enough time anyway in the Championship. Should we call it a day? Because most people might be going.
I think so. Yeah.
Going on for too long. I think we just wanted to talk about because I think we both work in football, like we said, so we can we feel very strongly about the game and where it's going, where it is. But Fulham, we're all right. We're doing good, and even though we lost at the weekend, we really enjoy watching the club that we support. Jack, what a marathon. Like the London Marathon this weekend. That was probably a more treacherous and tricky marathon that we've just ran through.
Yeah, I think towards the end of that was probably more of a difficult listen than if you were in the final 6 miles of the London Marathon towards the end there. But thank you. I hope everyone's enjoyed. It was a bit of a long one, but it's nice to talk about things that aren't just Fulham sometimes, and just kind of the general sport as a whole, which, as we've kind of as we've touched upon throughout today, is a little bit of a mess. But thank you very much. I always enjoy coming on these.
No, thanks very much for coming on, and thinking about all those controversial decisions that Nottingham Forest were at the end of this weekend, the Coventry at the end of. The last time we were on a real end of a controversial decision was probably United in the Cup. If not, I can't think of a time where we were really hard done by.
Yeah.
Really hard done by.
I'm trying to think back.
Odense BK when they put the ball a little bit closer to the wall.
There's not really been many where we've been fully done. Didn't we have a really bad one against Tottenham in the COVID season? Didn't we have a handball?
The Major, and then they changed the rule the next day.
Yeah, they changed the rule. That was a pretty bad one. But yeah, for general, I mean, we've jinxed it, and we're going to have a horrible decision go against us on Saturday.
We're going to be denied 4 penalties, and Elise and Eze will score 2 offside goals each. And VAR will fail to spot it. Thanks so much for watching. Enjoy the Palace game. Let's hope for not a drab 0-0, as we've completely built it up to be the best game ever. Enjoy the midweek football and the antics that will come with that, and come on Fulham.